Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, this is another video, and it's going to be about Frank Terpil of the documentary Frank Terpil Confessions of a Dangerous Man, who was a CIA gun runner, smuggler, terrorist trainer. How he has connections to the Libyan embassy shooting of London police officer um, Yvonne Fletcher. So let me go here. So this deals with the Blonde Ghost network that I kind of been talking about of Theodore Shackley of the CIA, i.e. the Blonde Ghost, Edwin Wilson, who was busted for selling C4 to Libya, but then also one of his business partners, Frank Terpil. So there's a good article by Peter Mass, published in 1986 in New York Times, titled "Selling Out: How an Ex-CIA Agent Made Millions Working for Gaddafi." So this is the part that I'll get going on. So Edwin Wilson first met Frank Terpil at a 1975 Christmas party for current and former intelligence operatives in Bathsheba, Maryland. Terpil was a CIA communications man who had been phased out under a cloud, suspected, among other things, of using diplomatic pouches to smuggle contraband. Terpil obviously knew about Wilson and told him that he had a really good hook into Libya through Gaddafi's first cousin, Saeed Gaddafi Fadam, who had handling military procurement out of Libyan embassy in London. His connection, Terpil said, was this Pennsylvania guy, Joseph McElroy, who was one of the earliest entrepreneurs to cash in on the money flush oil nations in Africa and the Middle East. McElroy began supplying everything from Pampers to pistols. Gradually, his best customers became Libya. The Pampers yielded more and more to pistols. Turpel had helped McElroy bring 50 handguns to London Embassy, but now McElroy wanted out. In 1984, the world was treated on television and in the press to the picture of a young British policewoman sprawled mortally wounded on the street, cut down by a fusillade of shots from Libya's London embassy during an anti-Gaddafi demonstration. Britain broke diplomatic relations with Libya, and after an 11-day standoff, the Libyans in the embassy were forced to leave the country. A search of the embassy then turned up several American guns discharged with discharge chambers, and although it was never announced publicly, they were traced by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to the shipment Turpel had helped deliver. It was in the fall of 1976, Wilson and Terpel set up a bomb factory for the Libyans about 25 miles south of Tripoli. He supplied a variety of explosives and programmable detonators, along with a cadre of instructors that included ex-CIA explosive men, then two technicians on leave from the secret Navy's weapon facility testing facility, um, which I believe is China Lake, and two Army bomb disposal experts whose services had often been used by the United States Secret Service on presidential security detail. Right? So this is Frank Terpil. You can look this documentary up, Frank Terpil, Confessions of a Dangerous Man. He goes into a lot of crazy details about his life and everything like that. And one minute, let's see something here.
They were fingerprinted and photographed in the squad room on the ninth floor.
In New York police records, they're described as Terpil, Frank Edward, nickname Nunn, date of birth November the 2nd, 1939, place of birth Brooklyn, New York, height 5'11", weight 215 pounds, hair brown, race white, and Corcoran George Gregory, nickname Gary, date of February the 9th, 1941. Place of birth, Detroit, Michigan. Height 5'11", weight 175 pounds, hair blonde, race white. Shortly before midnight on December the 22nd, Frank Terpil and Gary Corcola were taken from their cells on the ground floor of the New York criminal courts and arraigned before Judge Haft. Bail was opposed by Assistant District Attorney Matthew Crossan.
I opposed bail because we found during our investigation that Frank Terpil and George Gregory Corcola were major suppliers of weapons and assassination devices to terrorists and terrorist groups all around the world. During the course of our investigation, we obtained irrefutable evidence that they had supplied and attempted to supply to our undercover detectives who were posing as Latin American terrorists a variety of weapons, including 10,000 British machine guns, a silenced sniper rifle, a silenced semi-automatic pistol, poisons, liquid explosives, explosive briefcases, and other devices of a similar nature.
In court, the Honourable James Leff rejected Matthew Crossan's arguments. On the 5th of January 1980, Frank Terpil and George Gregory Corcola were released on bail after each had forfeited $100,000 surety. 4 months later, Frank Terpil was arrested a second time and committed to the federal penitentiary in Washington, D.C. Terpil and a man called Edwin Wilson were indicted by the federal authorities in Washington on charges including acting as an agent for a foreign power, to wit, Libya, transportation of explosives in foreign commerce, conspiracy to commit murder. In Washington, a judge once more rejected the prosecutor's appeal and granted bail to Frank Terpil. With serious charges against him in New York and now in Washington, Terpil was free again. On September the 5th, 1980, Frank Terpil and George Gregory Corcola, his co-defendant in New York, slipped out of the country for an undisclosed destination in the Middle East. Corcola was confident enough to travel on his own passport. The New York trial proceeded without them. The prosecution case was based on evidence obtained in a massive undercover operation. Detectives Rodriguez and Rod had originally followed a tip-off from a man who was involved with the suspects in an illegal arms deal. The two Spanish-speaking detectives were simply substituted for South American buyers that Terpil and Corcola were expecting.
So that's just kind of just like a little just preview of who Frank Terpil was. But let me see here. So we know based on this article that some of the guns that Terpil was using to smuggle found up in the hands of Libyans, and some of those guns were used to actually kill a London police officer. So I've never heard of this before, so this is kind of new to me as well.
It was a killing that sparked a diplomatic crisis. Crime that has yet to be solved. Nearly 30 years on, it's still not known who killed police officer Yvonne Fletcher outside the Libyan embassy in London during an anti-Gaddafi protest. Now, secret government documents released show a bigger picture of the tense standoff between the UK and Libya at the time. In the files, warnings by Libyan officials to the British Foreign Office the night before the shooting occurred. The threat that if the demonstration were to take place outside the embassy, there would be repercussions. One of the warnings was delivered to the UK's ambassador in Tripoli at the time, Oliver Miles. In embassy records, he noted that
the Libyan government would not be responsible for the consequences if the demonstration took place, and they might include violence. I said that threats of violence did not impress the British government, at which he withdrew, saying that no direct threat was intended. I wrote the report, of course, because I felt that it was sufficiently important that London must be informed, and I was told afterwards that the duty officer in the Foreign Office passed it on to the Home Office, and the Home Office passed it to the Police Special Branch, so the police were in the picture before the events took place the following morning.
But the protest went ahead with a shocking, fatal outcome. Despite the fallout from the shooting, what's very much documented here is Mrs. Thatcher's sense of the pragmatic. Even though the controversy was huge, the then Prime Minister and her cabinet quickly came to the conclusion that Yvonne Fletcher's killer would go free, not just because of the issue of diplomatic immunity, but also to protect their own staff in Libya. The admission came against the backdrop of diplomatic sieges in Tripoli and London. Relations between the two countries remained cool until the 1990s. 15 years after the embassy shooting, Gaddafi's government accepted responsibility for the death of Yvonne Fletcher and paid compensation to her family. But they gave no definitive answers on who Yvonne's killer could be. British police investigations pointed to two suspects with diplomatic immunity who therefore could not have been charged, and their names remain a secret. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
Inside the library of the world's least likely elder statesman, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was likened to a mad dog by Ronald Reagan. His Semtex was used by the IRA to kill scores of Britons, and his diplomats provoked the longest armed siege in British history. He's already said sorry to the Americans for Lockerbie. Now it's the UK's turn. There is one outstanding issue for many British people, which was the shooting outside the Libyan embassy in 1984 of Yvonne Fletcher, and I wonder really whether, sir, you have a message for the family of Yvonne Fletcher who are still seeking justice for that police officer who was gunned down. You see, I know in fact that such a thing happened. I know that a policewoman was shot and was killed when she was doing her duty, and that she's not an enemy to us. And we're sorry all the time. We expressed our sympathy because she was on duty, and maybe she was there to protect the Libyan embassy. This is a problem which should be solved. But who did it? That's the question. It's a question British investigators into the 25-year-old's murder believe they've answered. Enough evidence exists to charge 2 Libyans with conspiracy to cause death, according to reports earlier this month. But it's unthinkable the suspects will be handed over. Gaddafi is loyal to his henchmen. Witness the adulation when Lockerbie bomber Abdul Basit al-Bakrahi flew back from Scotland in August. President Obama massive al-Megrahi was a mistake.
It's a matter of concern to the British, Scots, and Americans. I mean, we're not really concerned about it.
A bigger question, arguably the biggest question in world politics right now, is whether Iran will do a Libya, give up nuclear ambitions without a fight. Gaddafi has no message for Tehran on this, but he has some extraordinary advice for the Palestinians.
Even the state of Palestine, when it's established, should have nuclear capabilities because the counterparts, such as the Israeli state, have nuclear capabilities. And if we don't want this situation, so we have to disarm the Israelis from nuclear weapons and nuclear capabilities.
For all his idiosyncrasies and imperfect human rights record, Colonel Gaddafi's grip on power remains resolute, and his list of friends is actually growing. Why? Because by many measures, oil has made Libya Africa's richest country. Colin Brazier, Sky News, Tripoli. Wix gives you the power of AI to
It began with a protest outside the Libyan embassy. Gunshots into the crowd. They were fired from inside the embassy. PC Yvonne Fletcher went down, dying.
I'm actually holding her head on that.
Her colleague, PC John Murray, was standing beside her.
I said to her here, I don't know what's happened. I will find out who did this and why.
And you're still trying to do that.
And I'm still trying to do that to this day.
Today, 40 years on from PC Fletcher's murder, there will be a huge ceremony at the scene. But no justice. Not yet. 3 years ago, Mr. Murray and campaigners won a significant victory in a High Court civil case. A judge branded a former Libyan minister, Salah Ibrahim Mabrouk, jointly liable for the murder, not the gunman, but a planner of the shooting. Mr. Murray hopes soon to launch a private criminal prosecution.
A senior High Court judge actually said if this matter came before me in a criminal court, I would have no hesitation in convicting. So therefore, as the CPS seem to be taking no further action in regard to the case of Salah Ibrahim, it's my responsibility to do that.
Mr. Mabrouk was arrested in London in 2015, but the case was dropped. Evidence from the time couldn't be used for reasons of national security, and the suspect denied any involvement. The likelihood of an official prosecution seems as remote as ever. Scotland Yard says the murder investigation will never close, but admits the chances of finding new evidence here or in Libya are low. Right now, there are no leads to follow. Today's memorial will be a service of celebration, say organisers, not sadness, and the continuing hope of justice for PC Fletcher. Marty Brunt, Sky News, Central London.
So there's actually an article on Wikipedia about it, the murder of Yvonne Fletcher. It's so interesting, we go back, this links to this article talking about how Frank Terpil of the CIA with his gun running and dealing, some of those guns actually landed with some Libyans in London, and they were likely used to actually kill Yvonne Fletcher. So Yvonne Fletcher was a Metropolitan Police officer. Occurred on April 17th, 1984, when she was fatally wounded by a shot fired from the Libyan embassy. So this is on Wikipedia right here. So the murder of Yvonne Fletcher. So yeah, it's pretty wild. There's like a Wikipedia article about it, but they don't actually talk about the Terpil connection. So rest in peace for her. It's unfortunate. She seemed like she was a very just ambitious, like a just a good person who just wanted to be a police officer and serve her community and everything. Unfortunately, she was, killed at one of these protests with an American gun that was traced back to by the ATF to Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was likely sold or procured by a Green Beret in the Belongos network that I'm talking about. So this will be a quick video, so I'll just end it right here, and I'll put the links to these in the comment section or the post section or whatever, so you guys can actually read about it. So thank you and take care.